Welcome, brave souls, to Dreadful Diaries, where the shadows whisper secrets and the night holds untold horrors. If you crave the thrill of the unknown, make sure to subscribe and join our community of fellow horror enthusiasts. Now, dim the lights, grab a blanket, and let's dive into our first tale of terror.
Emily and Jake had always enjoyed visiting yard sales on weekends, searching for hidden treasures and unique finds. One sunny Saturday morning, they stumbled upon a quaint neighborhood sale, where tables were filled with everything from vintage clothes to old furniture. As they wandered through the maze of items, something caught Emily's eye, a weathered stone marker, partially obscured by weeds and dirt. Curious, she approached it. The marker was small, about 2 feet tall, and intricately carved with the name Lily and the dates 1920 to 1922. Beneath the name, a delicate inscription read, "Forever in our hearts." Emily felt an inexplicable pull toward the stone, as if it were calling to her. Despite Jake's initial hesitation, they decided to buy it, thinking it would make an interesting addition to their garden. That evening, they placed the marker in a corner of their backyard, surrounded by flowers. As the sun set, a chill ran through the air, but they brushed it off as a typical autumn evening. However, as night fell, strange occurrences began to unfold. The first night, Emily awoke to the sound of soft giggles echoing through the yard. She dismissed it as her imagination, but the laughter continued, growing louder and more playful. Jake, still half asleep, mumbled about the neighbor's kids playing outside, but Emily knew better. There were no children in the vicinity. The next day, they decided to research the marker. They visited the local library and discovered that Lily was a young girl who had tragically drowned in a nearby river over a century ago. The townsfolk had mourned her loss deeply, and her family had placed the marker in their garden as a tribute. However, as time passed, the family moved away, and the marker was forgotten, left to the elements. That night, the giggles returned, but this time, they were accompanied by the faint sound of a lullaby. Emily felt a mix of fear and compassion for the spirit of the little girl. She began to leave small offerings at the base of the marker, flowers, toys, and even a drawing she made of a sunny day by the river. As the days turned into weeks, the occurrences intensified. Emily and Jake would find their belongings mysteriously rearranged, and sometimes, they would catch glimpses of a small figure darting through the garden. One evening, while tending to the flowers, Emily felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. She turned to see a translucent figure of a little girl, her hair flowing like wisps of smoke, and her eyes filled with longing. "Help me," the spirit whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want to play." Emily's heart ached for Lily. She realized that the spirit was trapped, longing for companionship and closure. Determined to help, Emily and Jake began to research ways to honor Lily's memory. They organized a small memorial in their backyard, inviting neighbors and friends to join them in celebrating the life of the little girl who had once lived in their town. On the day of the memorial, they decorated the yard with flowers, candles, and photographs of Lily. As the sun set, they shared stories of childhood, laughter, and the importance of remembering those who had passed. Emily felt a warm breeze sweep through the garden, and for the first time, the giggles transformed into joyous laughter. As the last candle flickered out, Emily closed her eyes and whispered, "You are not forgotten, Lily. You are loved." In that moment, she felt a sense of peace wash over her, and the air grew still. From that day forward, the strange occurrences ceased. The marker stood proudly in their garden, a symbol of remembrance and love. Emily and Jake often found themselves smiling at the memories they had created in honor of Lily, knowing that they had given her spirit the freedom to play once more. Years later, as they tended to their garden, they would sometimes hear the faint sound of laughter carried on the wind, a gentle reminder that love transcends time, and that even the forgotten can find their way home. Clara had always been drawn to the whimsical charm of yard sales. On a crisp autumn afternoon, she stumbled upon a quaint sale at the edge of town, where an elderly woman was selling an assortment of knickknacks and trinkets. Among the items, Clara's eyes were immediately drawn to a set of wind chimes hanging from a weathered tree branch. They were unlike any she had seen before, crafted from dark wood and adorned with intricate carvings of mythical creatures. The moment Clara picked them up, a chill ran down her spine. The chimes emitted a haunting melody that seemed to resonate deep within her. The elderly woman noticed Clara's fascination and smiled knowingly. "Those chimes have a history," she said softly. "They've been in my family for generations. They say they can warn you of danger." Intrigued, Clara purchased the wind chimes and hung them on her porch as soon as she got home. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a gentle breeze stirred, causing the chimes to sing their eerie tune. Clara felt a shiver of excitement mixed with unease. She had always loved the supernatural, but this felt different. The next morning, Clara awoke to the sound of the chimes ringing softly. As she stepped outside, she noticed a strange sensation wash over her, a sense of foreboding. Shaking it off, she went about her day, but the feeling lingered. Later that afternoon, as she drove to the grocery store, the chimes began to ring again, this time louder and more insistent. Suddenly, a vision flashed in her mind, a car crash at the intersection ahead. Heart racing, Clara slammed on the brakes just in time to avoid a collision with a vehicle that ran a red light. Shaken, she realized the chimes had warned her. Over the next few weeks, the wind chimes continued to sound their haunting melody, each time accompanied by a vivid warning. Clara learned to pay attention. They warned her of a storm that uprooted trees in her neighborhood, a gas leak in her apartment building, and even a close call with a falling branch while she was out for a walk. Each time, she felt a mix of gratitude and dread, knowing that the chimes were protecting her but also realizing the weight of their warnings. However, the chimes' messages began to grow darker. One evening, as the sun set and shadows crept across her porch, the wind chimes rang out a mournful tune. Clara felt a deep sense of unease settle in her stomach. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the vision that would come. This time, she saw a fire, a raging inferno consuming a building. Panic surged through her as she realized it was the local community center, where a charity event was scheduled for the following night. Clara knew she had to act quickly. She rushed to her phone and called the fire department, explaining her vision and urging them to investigate. At first, the dispatcher was skeptical, but Clara's urgency convinced them to send a team to the community center. When they arrived, they discovered a faulty electrical wire that could have sparked a devastating fire. Thanks to Clara's warning, they were able to fix the issue before disaster struck. Despite her relief, Clara felt a growing sense of dread. The chimes had saved her and others, but they were also revealing a darker side of fate. She began to wonder if she was meant to be a guardian or if she was simply a vessel for the warnings of something far more sinister. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, the chimes began to ring violently, their sound echoing through the house. Clara felt a wave of panic wash over her. She closed her eyes, bracing for the vision, but this time, nothing came. The chimes continued to ring, louder and more frenzied, as if they were trying to tell her something urgent. Suddenly, she heard a loud crash outside. Heart pounding, Clara rushed to the window and saw a tree had fallen across the street, narrowly missing her neighbor's house. The chimes had warned her, but she hadn't been able to see the danger in time. That night, Clara made a decision. She would no longer keep the chimes to herself. She organized a community meeting, sharing her experiences and the warnings she had received. The townspeople listened, some skeptical, others intrigued. Together, they formed a neighborhood watch, committed to looking out for one another and sharing any warnings they might receive. As the weeks passed, the chimes continued to ring, but Clara no longer felt the weight of their burden alone. The community came together, sharing their own experiences and forming a bond that made them stronger. The chimes became a symbol of unity and protection, a reminder that they were all connected. One day, as Clara sat on her porch, the wind chimes sang a gentle melody, one. Mark had always been a fan of quirky home decor, so when he stumbled upon a yard sale in his neighborhood, he couldn't resist exploring the eclectic assortment of items. Among the usual trinkets and furniture, one item stood out, a weathered garden gnome with a crooked smile and a mischievous glint in its painted eyes. It was unlike any gnome he had seen before, with intricate details that hinted at a long history. The elderly woman running the sale noticed his interest and chuckled. "Ah, that old thing. It's been in my family for generations. They say it has a mind of its own. Just be careful with it." Intrigued, Mark purchased the gnome and placed it in his garden, thinking it would add a whimsical touch to his yard. That night, as he settled into bed, he felt a strange sense of excitement. Little did he know, the gnome was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, Mark awoke to find the gnome had moved. It was no longer standing by the flower bed but had shifted to the edge of the patio, facing the house. He shrugged it off as a trick of his imagination, perhaps a result of the wind. After all, garden gnomes were often whimsical, right? But as the days passed, the gnome continued to change positions. One morning, it was perched on the fence, and the next, it was sitting on the porch steps. Mark began to feel uneasy. He tried to convince himself that he was simply forgetting where he had placed it, but deep down, he knew something was off. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to research the gnome's origins. He visited the local library and discovered that the gnome had once belonged to a witch named Alara, who had lived in the town over a century ago. According to local legend, Alara had used the gnome as a familiar, a magical companion that could spy on her neighbors and gather information for her spells. As Mark read the tales of Alara's mischief, he felt a chill run down his spine. The stories spoke of how the gnome had been cursed to remain in the garden, forever watching and waiting for its next master. The more he learned, the more he realized that the gnome was not just a decorative piece, it was a vessel of magic and mystery. That night, as Mark lay in bed, he heard a soft rustling outside his window. He peered out to see the gnome illuminated by the moonlight, its eyes glinting with an otherworldly glow. Suddenly, he felt a wave of dread wash over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the gnome was watching him, waiting for something. Determined to confront the gnome, Mark decided to stay up and observe it. He set up a chair on the porch, armed with a flashlight and a notebook. As the hours passed, he felt the weight of the night pressing down on him. Just as he was about to give in to sleep, he noticed the gnome shift slightly, its head turning to face him. "Okay, what do you want?" Mark said, half jokingly, half seriously. To his shock, the gnome's mouth moved, and a raspy voice echoed in the stillness. "I seek a master who understands the power of knowledge." Mark's heart raced. "What do you mean?" I can reveal secrets, show you the truth hidden in shadows. But you must be willing to accept the consequences." Unsure of what to do, Mark hesitated. "What kind of secrets?" "Those of your neighbors, their desires, their fears. You will see the world as it truly is." The temptation was strong. Mark had always been curious about the lives of those around him, but he also felt a sense of foreboding. He remembered the stories of Alara and the chaos her magic had caused. "No, I don't want that kind of power," he replied, shaking his head. The gnome's expression darkened. "You cannot refuse me. I am bound to you now." Suddenly, Mark was engulfed in a whirlwind of visions. He saw snippets of his neighbors' lives, hidden secrets, whispered arguments, and unfulfilled dreams. The images flooded his mind, overwhelming him with emotions he had never expected to feel. He saw the elderly couple next door struggling with loneliness, the single mother across the street battling financial hardships, and the seemingly perfect family hiding their own turmoil. As the vision subsided, Mark gasped for breath, realizing the weight of the knowledge he now carried. He understood that the gnome's power was not just a gift, it was a burden. He had been given insight into the lives of others, but at what cost? Determined to break the gnome's hold on him, Mark sought out the elderly woman. The Johnson family had always been fond of vintage items, so when they stumbled upon a dusty old television at a local estate sale, they couldn't resist. It was a classic model, with a wooden frame and a screen that had seen better days. The seller, an elderly man with a distant look in his eyes, warned them, "It doesn't work like a normal TV. It only shows static, but it has a story to tell." Intrigued, the family purchased the television and brought it home, excited to add a unique piece to their living room. They set it up in the corner, next to their modern entertainment system, and plugged it in. As expected, the screen flickered to life, but instead of channels, it displayed nothing but a swirling mass of static. At first, the family found it amusing. Their teenage son, Alex, joked about how it was the perfect decoration for a haunted house. But as the days passed, the static began to take on a life of its own. Late at night, when the house was quiet, they would hear faint whispers emanating from the television, almost as if it were trying to communicate. One evening, while the family was gathered in the living room, the static suddenly shifted. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, an image appeared, a young woman standing in a dimly lit room, her face filled with sorrow. The family gasped, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The image faded back into static, leaving them in stunned silence. "What was that?" Clara, the mother, asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Alex replied, his eyes wide with curiosity. But it looked real. Over the next few nights, the television continued to show fleeting images, glimpses of the same woman, now in different settings. Sometimes she was sitting alone in a park, other times she was standing by a window, staring out into the distance. Each time, her expression grew more despondent, and the whispers became clearer, filled with a sense of longing and despair. Determined to uncover the mystery, Clara began researching the history of the television. She discovered that it had belonged to a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the house before them. Margaret had been a talented artist, known for her beautiful paintings, but her life had been marred by tragedy. She had lost her husband in a car accident, and after his death, she had become increasingly withdrawn, eventually passing away alone in her home. As Clara shared her findings with the family, they felt a deep sense of empathy for Margaret. They realized that the static was not just a malfunction, it was a window into her past, a glimpse into the pain she had endured. The whispers grew louder, and the images more vivid, revealing moments of Margaret's life, her laughter, her love, and ultimately, her heartbreak. One night, as the family sat together, the television flickered again, this time showing a scene of Margaret painting in her studio, surrounded by vibrant colors. The atmosphere was filled with warmth and creativity, but as the scene shifted, it turned dark. They saw her sitting alone, tears streaming down her face, the canvas blank before her. Clara felt a surge of compassion. "She's trying to tell us something," she said softly. "She wants to be remembered." The family decided to honor Margaret's memory. They gathered art supplies and set up a small corner in their living room as a tribute to her. They painted, drew, and shared stories about their own lives, hoping to connect with the spirit of the woman who had once filled her home with creativity. As they engaged in their artistic endeavors, the television began to change. The static transformed into a soft glow, and the images of Margaret became less sorrowful. They saw her smiling, surrounded by friends and family, her spirit lifting as she watched the Johnsons embrace creativity and joy. One evening, as they painted together, the television flickered one last time. The screen displayed a final image of Margaret, her face serene and peaceful. She looked directly at the family, and for a moment, they felt a profound connection. The whispers faded into a gentle melody, and the static transformed into a soft, shimmering light. In that moment, the family understood that they had helped Margaret find closure. The old television, once a vessel of sorrow, had become a bridge between the past and the present. As the last image faded, the screen went dark, and the whispers ceased. From that day forward, the Johnsons kept the television as a cherished reminder of the woman who had once lived in their home. They continued to create art, inspired by Margaret's spirit, and shared her story with others. The static may have been silenced, but the connection they forged with the past remained alive, a testament to the power of empathy and remembrance. Lila had always been drawn to the charm of yard sales, where she could find unique items and hidden treasures. One sunny Saturday morning, she stumbled upon a quaint sale in her neighborhood. Among the usual assortment of clothes and furniture, something caught her eye, a small, blackened cauldron, its surface etched with mysterious symbols and a faint sheen of age. The elderly woman running the sale noticed Lila's interest and smiled knowingly. "Ah, that old thing. It's been in my family for generations. They say it belonged to a witch long ago. Just be careful with it." Intrigued, Lila purchased the cauldron, thinking it would make a quirky addition to her kitchen. She imagined using it for soups and stews, and perhaps even for some creative cooking experiments. Little did she know, the cauldron held secrets far darker than she could have imagined. That evening, Lila decided to make a hearty vegetable soup. As she chopped the ingredients and stirred the pot, she felt a strange energy emanating from the cauldron. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and she dismissed it as her imagination. After all, it was just an old pot. As the soup simmered, Lila noticed something odd. The vegetables began to swirl in the cauldron, almost as if they were dancing. She blinked, convinced she was seeing things, but the movement continued. A chill ran down her spine, but she shrugged it off, attributing it to the excitement of using her new find. The next day, Lila decided to try her hand at baking. She mixed ingredients for a batch of cookies and poured the batter into the cauldron. As she placed it in the oven, she heard a soft whispering sound, like a gentle breeze rustling through leaves. She paused, straining to listen, but the sound faded away. Shaking her head, she returned to her baking. When the cookies were done, Lila took them out, and to her surprise, they had taken on an unusual shape. Each cookie was perfectly formed like a small, intricate symbol. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, but the cookies tasted delicious, and she shared them with her friends, who raved about their unique flavor. As the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold in Lila's kitchen. The cauldron seemed to have a mind of its own. Ingredients would mysteriously appear on the counter, and meals would cook themselves without her intervention. Lila found herself creating dishes she had never even considered, each one more delicious than the last. However, with the culinary success came an unsettling feeling. Lila began to notice shadows flitting across her kitchen, and the whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. One night, as she prepared dinner, the cauldron began to bubble violently, and a thick, dark mist poured out, filling the room with an eerie fog. Panicking, Lila grabbed a towel and tried to wipe away the mist, but it only thickened. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a voice, clear and commanding. "You have awakened me, and now you must listen." Lila froze, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "I am the spirit of the cauldron, bound to this vessel for centuries. I was once the tool of a powerful witch, a master of potions and spells. But my power was misused, and I was cursed to remain here, waiting for a worthy successor. What do you want from me?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have shown creativity and passion in your cooking. Use my power wisely, and you can create wonders. But be warned, misuse it, and you will unleash chaos." Lila felt a mix of fear and excitement. The cauldron had given her extraordinary culinary skills, but she realized the responsibility that came with it. She had to tread carefully. Over the next few days, she experimented with the cauldron, creating dishes that brought joy to her friends and family. But she remained cautious, aware of the dark history that lingered within. One evening, Lila decided to host a dinner party, inviting her closest friends. As she prepared the meal, she felt a surge of confidence. She wanted to impress them with her newfound skills. However, in her eagerness, she added too many ingredients, ignoring the cauldron's warnings. As the cauldron bubbled and boiled, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows in the kitchen grew darker, and the whispers turned into frantic cries. Lila's heart raced as she realized she had crossed a line. The cauldron erupted, spewing a thick, black liquid that engulfed the kitchen. In a panic, Lila grabbed the cauldron and shouted, "Stop! I didn't mean to." The room fell silent, and the chaos ceased. When Sarah and Tom decided to furnish their new home, they were excited to explore local thrift shops and yard sales for unique pieces. One sunny Saturday morning, they stumbled upon a quaint estate sale in a quiet neighborhood. Among the various items, an old wooden crib caught Sarah's eye. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate carvings of animals and flowers adorning the sides. "Look at this!" Sarah exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. "It's perfect for our future nursery." Tom hesitated, glancing at the worn wood and faded paint. "Are you sure? It looks a bit old." "Exactly. It has character," Sarah insisted, envisioning the memories they would create. After a brief negotiation with the seller, they brought the crib home, excited to restore it to its former glory. That night, as they settled into bed, Sarah felt a sense of warmth and anticipation. They had plans to start a family soon, and the crib symbolized their dreams. However, as the clock struck midnight, a faint sound pierced the silence, a soft, heart-wrenching cry. Startled, Sarah sat up in bed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her heart racing. Tom nodded, his brow furrowed. It sounded like a baby. They exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to make of it. Maybe it's just the house settling, Tom suggested, trying to reassure her. But the crying continued, echoing through the darkened halls. It was a sound filled with sorrow, and it sent chills down Sarah's spine. Unable to shake the feeling of unease, she decided to investigate. She tiptoed down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest, and paused outside the nursery. As she peered into the room, the crib stood silently in the moonlight, but the air felt heavy with an inexplicable sadness. The crying had stopped, leaving only an eerie silence. Shaking off her fears, Sarah returned to bed, convincing herself it was just her imagination. The following nights were no different. Each time the clock struck midnight, the cries would return, growing louder and more desperate. Tom, now equally disturbed, suggested they look into the history of the crib. They spent the next day researching, visiting the local library and scouring old newspapers. What they discovered sent shivers down their spines. The crib had belonged to a family named the Millers, who had lived in their home decades ago. They had a baby girl named Emily, who tragically passed away under mysterious circumstances. The official cause of death was listed as sudden infant death syndrome, but whispers in the community hinted at something darker, a family torn apart by grief and secrets. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah and Tom visited the local historical society, where they learned more about the Millers. They discovered that after Emily's death, the family had fallen into despair. The mother, overwhelmed by grief, had become reclusive, and the father had left, unable to cope with the loss. The house had been abandoned for years, and the crib remained untouched, a haunting reminder of the tragedy. That night, as the couple lay in bed, the cries returned, more intense than ever. Sarah felt a deep sense of compassion for the lost child. "What if she's trying to tell us something?" she whispered to Tom. "I don't know, but we can't ignore it anymore," Tom replied, his voice steady. "We need to honor her memory." The next day, they decided to hold a small memorial for Emily. They gathered flowers, candles, and a few toys, placing them gently in the crib. As they lit the candles, they spoke softly, acknowledging the pain and loss that had lingered in the house for so long. "Emily, we want you to know that you are not forgotten," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We honor your memory and the love your family had for you." As they finished their tribute, a warm breeze swept through the room, and for the first time, the air felt lighter. The cries faded into a soft lullaby, wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. Sarah and Tom exchanged glances, feeling a sense of peace wash over them. That night, they slept soundly, the crib standing quietly in the corner. The cries had ceased, replaced by a serene silence. In the days that followed, they continued to care for the crib, treating it as a cherished piece of their home. They often spoke of Emily, sharing stories of their hopes for the future and the family they dreamed of having. Months later, as Sarah and Tom prepared for the arrival of their own baby, they felt a deep connection to the crib and the spirit of the little girl who had once occupied it. They knew that Emily's presence would always be a part of their family, a reminder of love, loss, and the importance of honoring those who came before them. As they welcomed their child into the world, Ethan had always been drawn to unique pieces of jewelry, so when he stumbled upon a small antique shop tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, he couldn't resist stepping inside. The shop was filled with an array of trinkets, but one item caught his eye, a stunning necklace with a deep blue gemstone that sparkled like the ocean. The intricate silver filigree surrounding the stone gave it an air of elegance and mystery. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with piercing eyes, noticed Ethan's fascination. "Ah, that necklace has a history," she said, her voice low and cautious. "It's beautiful, but be warned, many who have worn it have met with misfortune." Ethan chuckled, dismissing her warning as mere superstition. "I'll take my chances," he replied, eager to own such a captivating piece. He purchased the necklace and wore it proudly, feeling a sense of confidence and allure. At first, everything seemed fine. Ethan received compliments from friends and strangers alike, and he felt a newfound charisma. However, as the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. His car broke down unexpectedly, his computer crashed, and he received a series of unfortunate phone calls that left him feeling anxious and unsettled. Despite the mounting misfortunes, Ethan refused to believe the necklace was cursed. He wore it every day, convinced that it was simply a string of bad luck. But soon, the incidents escalated. A close friend suffered a serious injury in a freak accident, and Ethan found himself in a heated argument with his boss, resulting in a demotion at work. Desperate to understand what was happening, Ethan returned to the antique shop, hoping the shopkeeper could shed light on the necklace's history. When he arrived, the shop was empty, and the air felt heavy with an unsettling energy. He searched for any clues about the necklace's past and stumbled upon an old journal hidden beneath a stack of dusty books. The journal belonged to a woman named Clara, who had once owned the necklace. As Ethan read through the pages, he learned of Clara's tragic life. She had received the necklace as a gift from her fiancé, who had mysteriously disappeared shortly before their wedding. Heartbroken, Clara wore the necklace every day, believing it would keep her fiancé close to her. However, misfortune followed her relentlessly, her health deteriorated, her family fell apart, and she lost everything she held dear. Ethan's heart raced as he continued reading. Clara's final entry revealed that she had discovered the necklace was cursed, a dark legacy passed down through generations. It was said to bring sorrow to anyone who wore it, a reminder of the love lost and the pain endured. Determined to break the curse, Ethan sought out the necklace's previous owners. He spent days researching, tracking down family members and friends who had known Clara. Each person he spoke to recounted their own tales of misfortune linked to the necklace, confirming the shopkeeper's warning. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Ethan returned to the antique shop, hoping to find the shopkeeper. Instead, he found a small altar in the back of the store, adorned with candles and flowers. It was clear that the shopkeeper had been aware of the necklace's dark history and had created a space for those who had suffered because of it. Ethan placed the necklace on the altar, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He lit a candle and whispered a prayer for Clara and all those who had been affected by the cursed jewelry. As he did, he felt a warm breeze sweep through the shop, and for the first time since acquiring the necklace, he felt a sense of peace. In that moment, he understood that the necklace was not just a beautiful piece of jewelry, it was a vessel of grief and loss. By returning it to the altar, he hoped to release its hold on the lives it had touched. As he left the shop, Ethan felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The misfortunes that had plagued him began to fade, and he found himself surrounded by a renewed sense of hope. He realized that sometimes, letting go of the past was the only way to move forward. In the weeks that followed, Ethan focused on rebuilding his life. He repaired his relationships, found a new job, and embraced the love and support of his friends. The necklace, once a symbol of misfortune, had become a catalyst for change, teaching him the importance of letting go and honoring the memories of those who had come before. Though he would never forget the necklace's dark history, Ethan emerged stronger, carrying with him the lessons learned from Clara's tragic fate. He understood that while some things are beautiful, they can also carry the weight of sorrow, and it is up to us to choose how we respond to that legacy. Maggie had always been fascinated by antiques, so when she stumbled upon a quaint little shop during her weekend stroll, she couldn't resist stepping inside. The shop was filled with an eclectic mix of items: old furniture, vintage clothing, and dusty trinkets. As she browsed, something caught her eye: an old photograph framed in ornate wood. The photograph depicted a family standing in front of a charming Victorian house, their faces beaming with joy. However, as Maggie examined it more closely, she noticed a strange figure lurking in the background, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be watching the family. The figure was indistinct, almost blending into the trees, but there was something unsettling about its presence. Intrigued, Maggie decided to purchase the photograph, thinking it would make an interesting conversation piece for her home. She hung it in her living room, admiring the way it added character to the space. But as the days passed, she began to feel an odd sensation whenever she glanced at the picture. The figure seemed to draw her in, its presence growing more pronounced in her mind. One evening, as Maggie settled down to watch a movie, she caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned to look, but nothing was there. Dismissing it as her imagination, she returned to the screen. However, the feeling of being watched lingered, and she couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The following night, as she prepared for bed, Maggie heard a soft rustling sound coming from the living room. Curiosity piqued, she tiptoed down the hallway, her heart racing. As she entered the room, she was startled to see the photograph glowing faintly in the dim light. The shadowy figure appeared more defined, its features becoming clearer. Maggie's breath caught in her throat as she realized the figure resembled a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his expression unreadable. Panic surged through her, and she quickly turned to leave, but as she did, she felt a cold breeze sweep past her, sending shivers down her spine. Over the next few days, strange occurrences began to unfold. Maggie started seeing the figure in her daily life, out of the corner of her eye, in reflections, and even in the shadows of her home. Each time she caught a glimpse, her heart raced, and a sense of dread washed over her. It was as if the figure was following her, watching her every move. Desperate to understand what was happening, Maggie returned to the antique shop, hoping to find answers. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with knowing eyes, listened intently as Maggie recounted her experiences. "That photograph has a history," she said softly. "The family in it lived in that house many years ago. The man you see in the background is believed to be a spirit who never left. Why is he following me?" Maggie asked, her voice trembling. "The spirit may be drawn to you for a reason," the shopkeeper replied. "Perhaps he has a message or a story that needs to be told." Determined to uncover the truth, Maggie began researching the family in the photograph. She discovered that they had lived in the Victorian house for generations, but tragedy struck when the father mysteriously disappeared one night. The family had searched for him, but he was never found, and the house fell into disrepair after their grief consumed them. As Maggie delved deeper, she learned that the father had been a kind and loving man, devoted to his family. The more she uncovered, the more she felt a connection to him. It was as if he was reaching out to her, seeking closure for the pain that had lingered for so long. One night, as she sat in her living room, Maggie decided to confront the figure. She placed the photograph on the coffee table and spoke aloud. "I know you're here. I want to help you find peace." The room fell silent, and for a moment, Maggie felt a heavy weight in the air. Then, the temperature dropped, and the figure appeared before her, more defined than ever. He looked at her with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you for listening," he whispered, his voice echoing in the stillness. "I have been trapped between worlds, longing for my family. I need them to know I am at peace." Maggie's heart ached for him. "How can I help you?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Tell their story," he replied. "Help them remember me, and I can finally rest." With newfound determination, Maggie set out to honor the man's memory. She organized a small gathering, inviting friends and neighbors to share stories of the past. She displayed the photograph prominently, recounting the tale of the family and the love that had once filled their home. As she spoke, she felt a warmth enveloping her, and the figure. The Thompson family had been heartbroken since the passing of their beloved golden retriever, Max. He had been a loyal companion for over a decade, and his absence left a gaping hole in their lives. To help ease the pain, they decided to adopt a new pet. One sunny Saturday morning, they visited a local yard sale, hoping to find something special. As they browsed through the various items, the family stumbled upon a small, scruffy dog sitting in a makeshift pen. The dog had a shaggy coat of golden fur, reminiscent of Max, and big, soulful eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. The owner of the yard sale, an elderly woman with a warm smile, noticed their interest. "This little one is looking for a home," she said, her voice gentle. "Her name is Daisy. She's a bit shy, but she has a heart full of love." The Thompsons exchanged glances, and before they knew it, they were filling out the adoption paperwork. Daisy seemed to sense their excitement, wagging her tail and leaning into their hands as they petted her. They brought her home, eager to welcome her into their family. In the days that followed, Daisy quickly settled into her new environment. She explored the house, sniffing every corner and wagging her tail as she discovered her new family. The Thompsons were smitten, and it felt as if Max had returned to them in a new form. However, as the weeks passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. Daisy would often sit by the front door, staring intently at the empty space as if she were waiting for someone. At night, she would whine softly, her eyes fixed on a corner of the living room where no one else could see anything. The family brushed it off as typical pet behavior, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Daisy suddenly perked up, her ears twitching. She bolted to the door, barking excitedly. The Thompsons exchanged puzzled looks, wondering what had caught her attention. When they opened the door, there was no one there. That night, as they prepared for bed, the family heard a soft, familiar sound, a gentle scratching at the door, just like Max used to do when he wanted to come inside. The sound sent chills down their spines, and they hesitated before opening the door. To their surprise, Daisy was sitting quietly, her head tilted as if she were listening to something. Over the next few days, the family began to notice more peculiarities. Daisy would often sit in the same spot where Max used to lie, and she seemed to respond to commands and cues that only Max would have understood. It was as if she had inherited his spirit, and the Thompsons couldn't shake the feeling that Max was somehow still with them. One night, as Sarah, the mother, was cleaning up after dinner, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. She turned to see Daisy staring intently at the wall, her tail wagging furiously. Confused, Sarah approached her, and as she did, she felt a sudden rush of warmth enveloping her. In that moment, she was flooded with memories of Max, his playful spirit, his comforting presence, and the love they had shared. Determined to understand what was happening, Sarah decided to research the possibility of reincarnation in pets. She discovered stories of animals returning to their families in new forms, bringing with them the essence of their former selves. The more she read, the more convinced she became that Daisy was indeed a reincarnation of Max. One evening, as the family sat together, Daisy began to act strangely. She barked and ran in circles, her excitement palpable. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a gentle breeze swept through the room. The family felt a familiar presence, and in that moment, they knew Max was there with them. "Max?" Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Is that you?" Daisy stopped barking and sat down, looking up at Sarah with an understanding gaze. The air felt charged with love, and the family felt a wave of warmth wash over them. It was as if Max was reassuring them that he was still part of their lives, just in a different form. From that day forward, the Thompsons embraced Daisy as not just a pet, but as a continuation of the love they had shared with Max. They created a special place in their hearts for both dogs, honoring the bond that transcended time and space. Daisy brought joy and laughter back into their home, and the family felt a sense of peace knowing that Max's spirit would always be with them. As the seasons changed and the years passed, Daisy became an integral part of the Thompson family. They often shared stories of Max, reminiscing about the adventures they had together. And every now and then, when the wind would rustle. 17-year-old Jake had always loved Halloween. The thrill of dressing up, the excitement of trick-or-treating, and the chance to scare his friends made it his favorite time of year. This Halloween, he was determined to find the perfect costume. While browsing through a local thrift store, he stumbled upon a vintage costume that caught his eye, a tattered, dark cloak with a hood and a mask that resembled a twisted, grinning face. The moment Jake tried it on, he felt a rush of energy coursing through him. The fabric was surprisingly warm, and he could almost hear whispers in his ear, urging him to take it home. Ignoring the unsettling feeling in his gut, he purchased the costume, excited to show it off at the upcoming Halloween party. As the night of the party approached, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the costume was more than just a piece of clothing. When he wore it, he felt a strange sense of confidence, but also an unsettling urge to act out. He brushed it off as excitement, but deep down, he sensed something darker lurking beneath the surface. On the night of the party, Jake donned the costume, feeling the fabric envelop him like a second skin. As he arrived at the party, his friends were immediately drawn to him, complimenting his eerie appearance. The mask obscured his face, and he felt a thrill as he embraced the persona of the sinister figure he had become. As the night wore on, Jake began to feel an overwhelming compulsion to play pranks on his friends. At first, they were harmless, jump scares and fake spiders, but as the evening progressed, the pranks grew more dangerous. He found himself pushing boundaries, egging on his friends to take risks that made them uncomfortable. "Come on, it's just a little fun," he would say, his voice dripping with a confidence that felt foreign to him. The whispers in his mind grew louder, urging him to take things further. When his friend Sarah suggested they play a prank on the neighbor, an elderly man known for his grumpiness, Jake felt a surge of excitement. "Let's do it," he exclaimed, the mask hiding the sinister grin that spread across his face. The group gathered outside the man's house, and Jake led them in a plan to scare him by throwing fake spiders through the window. As they executed the prank, Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. But when the elderly man emerged, his face twisted in anger, Jake's heart raced. The man stumbled backward, clutching his chest, and collapsed to the ground. Panic erupted among the group as they rushed to help, but it was too late. The man had suffered a heart attack, and despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The news hit Jake like a freight train. He felt a mix of horror and guilt, but the costume seemed to whisper to him, urging him to dismiss the incident as an accident. It wasn't your fault, it seemed to say. You were just having fun. Haunted by the event, Jake tried to remove the costume, but it felt like a part of him. The whispers grew more insistent, compelling him to embrace the darkness. He began to lose control, and the line between Jake and the sinister alter ego blurred. He found himself drawn to more dangerous pranks, each one escalating in severity. One night, he decided to target a rival group of teenagers who had mocked him at school. He devised a plan to scare them at a local haunted house, but as he donned the costume, he felt an overwhelming urge to do more than just frighten them. The whispers urged him to take revenge, to make them feel the fear he had endured. As he approached the haunted house, he felt a surge of power. The costume transformed him, and he reveled in the chaos he was about to unleash. But as he entered, he saw the faces of his friends, and for a moment, the mask slipped. He hesitated, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. In that moment of doubt, the whispers turned into a deafening roar. Embrace it. Show them who you really are, they screamed. Jake felt a wave of darkness wash over him, and he lost control. He lunged at the group, intending to scare them, but the energy surged through him, and he accidentally knocked over a prop that caused a chain reaction, leading to a fire breaking out in the haunted house. Chaos erupted as people scrambled to escape. Jake stood frozen, the mask slipping from his face as he watched the horror unfold. The costume had taken over, and he realized too late that he had become the very monster he had tried to embody. In the aftermath, Jake was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. The fire had injured several people, and he was haunted by the knowledge that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. The whispers faded, leaving him alone. In the small, forgotten town of Eldridge Hollow, where the fog clung to the cobblestone streets like a shroud, a man named Thomas stumbled upon an old record player in the attic of his late grandmother's house. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the cracked window, illuminating the relic of a bygone era. The record player was ornate, with intricate carvings of vines and flowers, and it seemed to hum with a life of its own. Curiosity piqued, Thomas carefully dusted off the surface and examined the collection of records stacked beside it. Each one was labeled with faded ink, the titles hinting at a time long past, Whispers of the Heart, Dancing in the Moonlight, and Echoes of Yesterday. He felt an inexplicable pull to the player, as if it were calling to him. That evening, with the sun dipping below the horizon, Thomas set the needle on the first record, Whispers of the Heart. As the music filled the room, a haunting melody enveloped him, and he was transported back to a time he had never known. The notes seemed to weave a tapestry of memories, and he found himself standing in the town square, surrounded by people dressed in vintage clothing, their faces filled with joy and laughter. But as the song progressed, the scene shifted. The laughter faded, replaced by hushed whispers and fearful glances. Thomas watched in horror as a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, a man with a twisted smile and eyes that glinted with malice. The townsfolk scattered, their joy replaced by panic. He realized he was witnessing the tragic event that had haunted Eldridge Hollow for decades, the night of the Great Fire, when a mysterious figure had set ablaze the town's beloved theater, claiming the lives of many. The music faded, and Thomas found himself back in the attic, heart racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the record player held more than just music. It was a vessel of memories, a portal to the past. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to play another record. Dancing in the Moonlight filled the air, and once again, he was transported. This time, he saw a couple dancing under the stars, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns. But as the song reached its crescendo, the scene darkened. The couple was suddenly engulfed in flames, their screams echoing in the night. Thomas realized he was witnessing the aftermath of the fire, the devastation it had wrought on the community, the loss of love and life. With each record he played, Thomas was drawn deeper into the town's tragic history. Echoes of yesterday revealed the sorrow of the families left behind, the grief that lingered like a ghost in the streets. He saw the townsfolk mourning their lost loved ones, their lives forever altered by the tragedy. The record player was not just a machine. It was a keeper of secrets, a reminder of the pain that had shaped Eldridge Hollow. As the final record played, Thomas felt a sense of urgency. He realized that the town needed to confront its past, to honor those who had suffered and to seek closure. Inspired by the stories he had witnessed, he gathered the townspeople in the square, sharing the tales of love, loss, and resilience that the record player had revealed to him. Together, they lit candles in memory of the victims, their flickering flames illuminating the darkness that had long overshadowed Eldridge Hollow. The townsfolk began to share their own stories, their voices rising in a chorus of remembrance. The weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a sense of unity and healing. As the night wore on, Thomas returned to the attic, the record player silent now. He placed his hand on its surface, feeling a warmth radiate from within. It had served its purpose, bridging the gap between the past and the present, allowing the town to reclaim its narrative. In the days that followed, Eldridge Hollow transformed. The townspeople rebuilt their lives, honoring the memories of those lost while embracing the future with hope. And though the record player remained in the attic, it was no longer a haunting relic, it had become a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, music could heal, memories could unite, and the past could be faced with courage. In the quaint town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a woman named Clara stumbled upon a peculiar antique shop while wandering through the cobblestone streets. The shop was filled with an array of forgotten treasures, each with its own story waiting to be told. Among the dusty shelves, Clara's eyes were drawn to a small, ornate box, intricately carved with swirling patterns and adorned with gemstones that glimmered in the dim light. The box was locked, and despite her curiosity, the shopkeeper had no key. Clara felt an inexplicable urge to possess it, as if the box were calling to her. After a brief negotiation, she purchased it, her heart racing with excitement and a hint of trepidation. Once home, Clara placed the box on her kitchen table, its presence both alluring and unsettling. She examined it closely, running her fingers over the carvings, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath her touch. The box seemed to hum with energy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it held something significant within. After hours of contemplation, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. She retrieved a small hammer and a chisel from her toolbox, determined to pry the box open. With each strike, her heart raced, a mix of anticipation and fear coursing through her veins. Finally, with a resounding crack, the lid splintered open, revealing a dark, empty space inside. As she peered into the box, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles she had lit. The air grew heavy, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, a swirling mist began to rise from the box, coalescing into a figure, a woman, ethereal and ghostly, with eyes that burned with fury. Free at last, the spirit shrieked, her voice echoing like a distant thunderclap. You have released me from my prison, and now I shall have my vengeance. Clara stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you want? She gasped, fear gripping her. The spirit's face twisted in rage. I was wronged by those who sought to silence me. They trapped me in this box, and now I will make them pay. With a wave of her hand, the room darkened, shadows creeping along the walls. Realizing the danger she had unleashed, Clara's instincts kicked in. Wait. I didn't mean to release you. I just wanted to know what was inside, she pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. The spirit paused, her expression shifting from rage to curiosity. You seek knowledge? You wish to understand my plight? Clara nodded, her fear giving way to empathy. Yes, tell me your story. Maybe there's a way to help you find peace. The spirit hesitated, then began to recount her tale. Her name was Alara, a woman wronged by her own family centuries ago. Accused of witchcraft and betrayal, she had been imprisoned in the box by her jealous sister, who sought to claim Alara's fortune and love. For years, Alara had languished in darkness, her spirit filled with anger and sorrow. As Alara spoke, Clara felt a deep connection to her plight. You deserve justice, not vengeance, she said softly. Let me help you find the truth. We can uncover what really happened. The spirit's eyes softened, and for the first time, Clara saw a flicker of hope within them. You would do this for me? Yes, Clara replied, determination in her voice. Together, we can reveal the truth and set you free. With a newfound purpose, Clara and Alara embarked on a journey to uncover the secrets of the past. Clara researched the history of Willow Creek, delving into old records and speaking with the town's elders. She learned of the betrayal that had led to Alara's imprisonment and the lies that had been woven to protect the true culprit. As Clara pieced together the story, she discovered that Alara's sister had lived a life of regret, haunted by her actions. With Alara's guidance, Clara confronted the spirit of the sister, who had been trapped in her own guilt for centuries. The confrontation was intense, filled with raw emotion, but Clara stood firm, urging the sister to acknowledge her wrongs. In a moment of clarity, the sister confessed her sins, seeking forgiveness for the pain she had caused. Alara, filled with a mix of anger and sorrow, found the strength to forgive her sister, realizing that vengeance would only bind her to the past. As the two spirits reconciled, a brilliant light enveloped them, and Clara felt a wave of warmth wash over her. The box, once a prison, transformed into a vessel of peace, its carvings glowing with a soft luminescence. Thank you, Alara whispered, her voice now gentle.